All right, so New Year's resolutions. There was a point in my life where I maybe thought they were a bit funny, and I chuckle a little bit now, even thinking about this idea of your best year ever. And I think I've shared this in a group setting before, at least maybe with some individuals. But in December of 2019, I actually went to this event called Your Best Year Ever. And it was a strong group of entrepreneurs. There were people there, such as a comedian, a guy named JP Sears, Hal Elrod, the guy who wrote a book called The Miracle Morning, a guy named Benjamin Hardy, just a really, really strong group of people. And this idea was let's, create a plan, a vision, work on some things to have our best year ever in 2020. So I'll just leave that. I'll leave that there. But I will say what's interesting is that there are some people who believe that 2020 was one of their best years ever overall. The things that came out of it for them, I know there are a lot of different thoughts and topics on that. Things definitely changed for the world. However, that's in some regards a very common theme when you're an entrepreneur or a business owner is that you have a plan or a goal and something comes up. Now, usually it's something a little bit different, maybe not something that has a global impact, but I think that's important to acknowledge that when you have a plan or you have a goal, let's say you're on this quest right now, you're thinking, let's make 2025 my best year ever, maybe my family's best year ever, those around me. You have a team you're supporting, all of these different things. What does that look like? And when something comes up, how will I respond to that? So there's really a couple things I want to talk about this about. One is the idea of a mental model. Actually, I usually don't take notes in these videos, but I wrote down a couple of things to keep me on track. One is a mental model, and the other one is writing down and being specific. Sounds kind of basic, so I hope to add some context that really helped shift you into maybe an anchor of something you're already doing or a new way of thinking. I will say, I started with Best Version Media when I was 29 years old. I was actually a publisher at 29, and I realized I didn't realize at first, but I realized in my first conference that was not very common. It was mostly people who had a tremendous amount of experience, especially in the business world, or other things. There were a variety of backgrounds. I had a strong core of folks who had advertising backgrounds around me in Northern California, where I started, but it was very uncommon to be in your 20s. In fact, I'm not even certain there were other publishers in their 20s, and I was at the end of my 20s, obviously. But that was nearly a decade ago. So it's interesting to think about what has a decade, 9 years, I guess, essentially. It'll be a decade later this year, but 9 years plus in the business of best version media. What have I learned? That list is very long. But two things that really stand out to me through this experience of being great, being great not from a sense of personally being great, but working with great people, or how do you be great? What does that look like? Extracting these ideas and concepts. These are two things that I have found, prove themselves to be very true over the test of time. And the first one is a mental model. Like I said, the second one are writing things down and being specific. So let's talk about what a mental model is. In fact, I've got a couple of books here I like to read. I will say I read less the second half of last year than I think I've read in years and years. Could make a lot of reasons, birth of a new son, a lot of change in life, those things that kind of threw me off. But I definitely went through a short period where I just didn't consume as much in terms of reading. Now, you don't need to read to master life or do anything. In fact, there are a lot of ways to learn, right? Simply walking your dog every day, you can pick up new things, life lessons. So there's knowledge and wisdom everywhere. In fact, wisdom is a very interesting in general because it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to practice it. And the practice of accepting or looking at things and say, what's hindering me, what's helping me, that's a big form of wisdom, and that can be found all over life without any books. But I look at these books, and there's a book here. This one's actually called The Great Mental Models, and that's what inspired me to think of it in this framework. Really fantastic book. One of our founders, actually, Pete Erickson, sent me down this path of mental models about 8 or 9 years ago. And lo and behold, I looked at it a little bit, the idea of these mental models, but never really dug into it until now. It's very fascinating. Got a few other books here. These ones are kind of fun to think about. This classic Jim Rohn book, if you don't know who that is, he's like the guy who mentored Tony Robbins, I guess, the five major pieces of life puzzle. These are just things that found them right on my desk recently. And this one's really fascinating, how to make a few $1 billion, right? So I don't know that this guy has personally earned $1 billion. I haven't got to that part of the book, but it is fascinating just to learn, even in the beginning stages of it, is that there are these ideas, there are these habits, there are certain things that people do to navigate life more successfully. And that's at the end of the day, when it comes to being a great person, a great publisher, a great leader, for those of you that are leading households. I mean, a publisher really is leading your local community, right? Some of you may be leaders in the business. So leadership is something that transcends the idea of an official title that says dash leader on it. But these mental frameworks, they just help us navigate things a little better. So those of you that know me well enough, I spent a lot of time in the last couple of years in the grappling world, like jujitsu, a lot more than other things. Prior to that, though, I was heavily more into boxing, kickboxing, things like that. So I had put this emphasis, this focus for a bit on getting some skills up to speed. And one of my 2025 things was to get back into a competitive level of boxing, at least. So started the year doing that bright and early this morning with one of my nephews. So when I think of this, these two things I'm going to talk about, I thought of this idea of throw down, right? So I want to throw down some challenges, a couple of challenges, at least two, maybe more will emerge, but I want to throw down at least two challenges that can help set up 2025 years, the best year you've ever had in BVM. And that means a lot of things, right? When we are doing great at BVM, I have generally found that that means our health is doing great because we need to take care of ourselves in order to have the energy to be successful at the business. In fact, being successful at the business, doing hard things gives us energy. We tend to want to be more disciplined when we're doing right things. These all actually stack and collapse into each other in a very positive way. To be great at XYZ, the other things are lining up. But there's when I say being a great publisher, being great at BVM, 2025 best year ever, it's not just the health of your business, but personal health, finances, relationships, really all of these components that make a great life. So, what is if you've never thought about this, what are some of your mental strategies? Now, that might be even a hard concept to grasp. Because when I hear that, I'm like, well, mental strategy. I just, now I'm thinking about thinking. That's a pretty wild thing. But there are mental strategies, and they directly tie to problem solving. And what is life? What is business other than a series of problems and solutions, right? If you get stuck on something for a while, that's an interesting thing to reflect on and say, how is my mental strategy preventing me from moving over, through, or past this obstacle, right? So we may need a new mental strategy, mental framework for overcoming that obstacle. So problem solutions, mental framework. So my challenge to you is to invite, this may be a very common strategy for you already, so maybe take it to the next level, or it may be something a little newer to you, but it's based on the foundation of our business, which is humility, right? So we have our culture, foundation of that humility. Humility is a whole topic in and of itself, but I believe a big part of being humble is the ability to ask great questions and to almost ping pong or play tennis with ideas, right? I think of a great idea as like a marble, a piece of clay that you turn into a marble statue. You're shaping it, and that's a really positive thing. But my throwdown going to this boxing 2025 year, best year ever, my throwdown or my challenge to you is to invite the mental strategy or a component of your mental strategy into asking more questions, right? So what kind of questions make sense for us to improve our success, improve our lives? Simple questions like, how might I do this better? Right now, that's a really hard question to ask ourselves sometimes, especially when we've had a certain level of success. But this is something that we see very, very common with high achievers. what am I doing great? And how might I do this better, right? There's two questions right there that you might invite into your mental framework as you are reflecting on maybe days, weeks, or months, or what that looks like. So that's my first throwdown to you. It may open a new door, right? This idea of being open. So that's another mental strategy, this idea of being open. Now, we can be so open that we're flimsy and we're, blowing with the wind like a leaf back and forth, left and right. So, a really strong mental framework that I push myself to remember and remind myself of is the idea of, being concrete in some ways and flexible in others, like bend but don't break, right? So I want to have, in fact, I think Shelly said this on the conference call this morning, concrete goals, but plans written in the sand, meaning I know what I'm going for and I'm moving in that direction, but if I allow some openness and flexibility, things may get invited into my life in a slightly different way than I had imagined, right? So that's part of this growth mindset, being open, this idea of humility too. And I have already seen that happen. In fact, this will be a nice segue into the idea of writing your goals down. But New Year's Eve, I was talking to a family member, asked them something they're looking forward to or excited or what they want out of 2025. And they shared it with me. And I do this everywhere in life, but I challenge them a little bit to be more specific because it was very vague and very loose. Lo and behold, they worked through that. I could tell it was tough. Sometimes it's very tough for us to share something, and especially to be specific when it's something we want to get out of life. And then magically, the next day, what I saw is the opportunity for that desire, that wish for that person, for that to happen. The opportunity presented itself literally the next day in a very fantastic way, super special. So I'm excited to see them, literally starting already to make that part of their year from putting it out there, being specific and being open to someone giving them feedback to refine it. Now, openness isn't always about feedback. It's about just being open to those opportunities. So challenge number one, my throwdown, invite some new perspective, ask some questions, whatever it looks like, challenge your mental frameworks of what might be better or best in 2025. Part two. So part two, like I said, writing down a specific goal. In fact, so I said, sort of segue into that. Same family members, same group, rewind to December of 2023. We were sitting, in fact, I have this piece of paper right here, pretty neat. I can wave it around. Can't reveal all the secrets, but we were with some family and friends, and part of our New Year's Eve, I should say tradition, was the first time we did it. The friends invited us to do it, was to write down each of the months for the year 2025, or 2024 in this case, and then put something that how would you say this, that we really would like to accomplish or have brought into our life, achieved for each of the months in 2024. Now, what's really interesting is I did this, but I don't know where I didn't know where I put the paper. I tucked it away somewhere. I'm one of those people when I write something down, I have a whiteboard up here. I like to look at it and revisit it quite often. So lo and behold, what's really fascinating is I found this paper cleaning out the desk and area. Over the last couple of days, was like reshifting, revisiting some things for 2025 myself. And I went through and counted, and it is 7 of the 12 things on the paper actually happened. And they weren't just things that were going to happen by accident. These were very specific goals and targets. And then of the other ones, one didn't happen because of an injury, most likely. It's really funny. The other ones are actually in the works. So 1, 2, 3, yeah. So the other ones are, I mean, they're not very far off. In fact, one is still in process, but just took a little longer. So it's pretty fascinating, right? So maybe you do something like that, but there is a ton of magic in writing down our goals, whether they're short term, long term, all of the above. In fact, there is some research. I was pointing to some of this stuff earlier, and the statistics are interesting. So I'm going to elaborate on the statistics, but it said, I believe 42 or 43%. You're 42 or 43% more likely to accomplish your goals for the year if and when you write them down. Now, for some people, might go, well, that doesn't seem like very much. That's less than half, but it's actually a lot more than that. So let's say right now, I don't know what the probability is. let's say in the position you're in, you're 5 or 10%, 20, let's say you're 20% likely to achieve the goals you've written down. Maybe some of them are just really big, astronomical. So if you go 42%, that's actually not just 42%. That is 210%, right? 210%, what you've added in terms of percentage to accomplish your goals. Because if you're 20% likely and now you go to 42%, the business math is that is 210, it's 210%. No, no, yeah, 210% increase, right? Because that is a full 20%. Yeah, I did that right. Okay, so it's a 210% increase the way statistics work and percentages on achieving your goals. That's pretty wild, right? Just from writing them down. So really something special to think about. And I hope I did that math right, but it's either going to be 105% or 210%. I hardly do math on the spot. So that's really fascinating. So there's my second challenge to you is write things down, in the different areas of life, your business, your health, your relationships. What do you want those things to look like? Double down on the habits and activity. And then when you invite that framework of mental strategies, because that's what everything is. There is a mental or thinking, cognitive strategy that leads to thinking and cognitive habits, which create a certain level of success. So if you write down your goals and you think about thinking a bit, uh, and put this energy mixed with the discipline of consistency in 2025, it will be really wild and really fascinating. And I would actually truly love and enjoy seeing or hearing from some folks towards the end of the year or as these things happen, where they're like, wow, I wrote down this thing, challenge myself to ask more questions and think about this or that. And lo and behold, here I am. Because it's so easy for us to push some of these things aside and mark them as not important, or to get stuck in the way that we've always been doing things. And if you're getting great results, it's not the end of the world. But what if there's a next level that is truly, more inspiring personally to what you can and will accomplish with the right formula? So, wishing you the best. Please feel free to share. I know many of you already have. If you haven't shared with me some of your goals for 2025, share at will. I know there's different ideas, and we're like, well, I can't share everything, or I got to share this, and I want accountability, but I don't want to reveal all my secrets. So, whatever it looks like for you, Happy New Year and have fun.